Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. This is a platform where we get curious about all things gender, sex and sexuality, as well as feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I'm speaking to Sophia, a speaker, singer, mentor, transformational storyteller, visionary and prayer of prayers. She is also the host of several podcasts including Vagina Talks with Sophia Wise One, Medicine Caller and Temple Erotica, Stories of Sacred Sexuality. Sophia identifies as gender-transcendent and welcomes all pronouns. Find out what that means to Sophia in this episode. We also talk about the physical experience, spirituality, vibration and energy, the divine feminine, the female body, menstruation, premenstrual dysphoric disorder or PMDD, sex and embodying the genital energy of both sexes. We talk about gender as a role, archetype or presentation, and also conditioning, oppression of the feminine, reclaiming identity, healing, and a vision for the future. It was recorded on the 10th of June 2020. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, welcome. What's your name?
Sophia.
And how do you identify?
I go by Sophia Wise One, daughter of the wind, spider queen, among other things. And I identify as gender-transcendent.
Oh, now that's a term I had not heard before. So what does that mean to you?
It means to me that I have always understood kind of intrinsically, like in my body and my being, that gender and even my body was a vehicle for a spiritual experience. And so I don't actually identify, I do my best not to identify with a lot of aspects of this kind of temporary and to me like very sacred and very important journey. So it's like a costume. So in some ways I wear it. And we'll probably talk about this. Like there's many ways in which I really embrace womanness. Like I really, that was like really nourishing and thriving for me. And so it's like, I embrace that and I put that on and I live into it for what it has to offer. It's not who I am. It's not what I am. What I am is I'm a being. Like an energetic, vibrational, soul journeying being that has come into manifested form.
See, I like that perspective. I don't hear much of that. So that it's great to explore this further. So would you, if you had to give yourself a label, I mean, what would it be? Would non-binary fit, do you think?
I don't really, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not particularly inaccurate, but it doesn't resonate. I can get, it's like all of these things, that's for me, I have this ability. It's like, I can see it from all these different perspectives. And I'm like, yeah, like actually that's kind of the whole thing is like, I'm like, yeah, totally. I can totally identify as that, or I can identify as that. And I can identify as that. Like it's like, so sure. Yeah, sure. Non-binary, gender, non-conforming, like a little bit more gender fluid, I think is probably, there. But again, those are all references to taking something on and taking something off. So it's like, on what level are we talking about? Are we talking about like my identity or my understanding of myself and my truth? Are we talking about my expression or my experience as a human or in a social dynamic or in a social relating space, or a personal relating space? Because all of those to me are, when I start to look at them, right? If I actually look and I'm directing my focus in that way, then I have a lot of different experiences and a lot of different things to kind of say about that.
Well, we can cover all that. Yeah, there's all these layers to a person, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah, and I was thinking as well about the physicality of it, I suppose, as well. I mean, if you'd like to start with one of those, feel free.
Sure. I guess one piece I'll say is that the idea of non-binary, I think this is what gets me, this is like what like gets me in my heart is like the fact that we have to say like I'm non-binary means that the way that the gender binary or gender identification has been presented is inherently dehumanizing.
Mm.
Like I think every person is like inherently a non-binary person. Like everybody is carrying these aspects that if gender is a role or if gender is an archetype, if gender is a presentation, then I don't think I've ever met anyone who only strictly 24/7, 365 days a year has only ever embodied and expressed the one singular entirety of that gender role. I've never met anyone ever, you know, and the fact that there's some sort of like it's gross in my body that there's some sort of like ideal man and ideal woman feels so gross and feels like so inherently denying the truth of what being human is. Like it's, and I really understand, I've like deeply understood this in myself and been reflected back by other authors and teachers talking about the link between this ideal gender and colonialism and white supremacy. This idea that there's this like right way of being, it's so gross to me. It's so gross. It's like, it's like, it makes my skin crawl. Like, I'm just like, how is that real? How is that based in reality? How is that based in any experience that anyone's ever had? Like ever, like, have you ever, it like breaks my brain. And so there's this part of me that's just like, and this is one of those things where it's like, you've invited me on to talk about my personal experience and my viewpoint. And so it's like, however anyone else understands or uses language as a way to clarify or define or to express, like words are tools, right? And any tool can be like, anything can be a tool or be a weapon, right? And so gender identification, gender expression, gender language can be a tool to express or to explore and build connection, or it can be a thing to dominate, to strip, to take away, to prescribe what someone is or what someone is not. And just that notion that there is this thing, like you could say like that a man is like a I don't know, so I'm thinking like a brick or something, right? Like that it's this like thing, and it's like, and then all that collapses my brain, because I'm like, even a brick, it's like depends on what layer you're looking at a brick. You're looking at the minerals, or you're looking at the age of it and how much of it is water and how much of it is, if you really take a minute, it just all kind of crumbles. And so one of the things that I often think about with this is just like, gender doesn't matter at all because it's made up and it's a tool that's either useful or harmful. So gender and pronouns don't matter, except that they matter. And as long as they matter, they really matter, you know, like, like it's like, if we're playing the game where gender and pronoun is like a real thing, then it's really important that people personally have the ability to use that landscape or framework to express, embrace, accept themselves and each other, right? And to me, if it's not being used in that way, then it's just a tool of oppression and control. It's just a way of saying either you're doing human right or you're doing human wrong. And that's so heartbreaking to me. And it's like, get your fucking like opinions out of my body and my understanding of myself and my like witnessing of the people that I love. Like, get out, like get fuck out, get out of like, why are you trying to judge this as being like a right thing or a wrong thing? So like, it really touches this place in me where I really see how it has, whether it always was or whether it has was then taken on as a weapon. And I feel like it was weaponized, or maybe even the creation of it perhaps as I don't know. It's like, I don't need to necessarily have a sense of that, of like that origin story piece, but like even the fact that if, which is not, if gender came out of the roots of genitals, then like there aren't just two. Like, that's not even how bodies and humans are made. Like, intersex is fucking real, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a complete erasure and denial of, again, the human experience and our community and the truth of like who we are, or like our hormonal expressions that shift, you know? And like, some of us have these kinds of ways of bodies of expressing at 10 that are, well, everybody's different at 10 than they are at 20, right? But like, and then 20, and then at 40, and then at 60, like there's this way in which it's like, if we admit that we're alive and that we're changing and that we're in relationship to our environments, and that all of these things will shift the ways that our hormones move, and that will shift the way that we understand ourselves, and that will shift the way that we relate to our environments, like to make a binary at all is, I think it's harmful. So it's like, to me, to say I'm non-binary is just to be like, welcome to fucking reality. Like, welcome to reality. Like, yeah, like I have a vagina, I have a womb. I love that I menstruate. It is like an anchor of my sanity. Like it was the thing that made me go insane.
Right.
And I was diagnosed with the PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. My menstrual cycle was so extreme. My mental health behavior and experience was much more similar to bipolar, manic depressive.
Oh, wow.
Landscape.
I'd never heard of that term either.
Yeah.
So I'm learning lots today. This is awesome.
PMDD. And I had enough of a foundation in my upbringing, a spiritual root and a body-based root, that when my body was doing this cycle, this biorhythm cycle of emotional up and down, physical pain, all of these things, I mean, it was just so intense. I looked to that and said, oh, you're trying to communicate something to me. Let me pay attention. And I deepened my relationship with my menstrual cycle, and I turned to moon lodging and sacred bleeding practices. And so I've turned to my womb as a huge healing anchor in my life. And I see the way that wombs, especially white wombs in this fucking white supremacist, eugenic oriented, like superior damage, like world shredding to everyone, you know, like nobody, to me, there's no hurting or oppressing someone that doesn't destroy everyone involved. Like that's like we're inherently connected. So like nobody gets out on top, in my opinion. Everybody just gets out wounded in different ways. And some of them fucking, it's just tragic. So this understanding that like this control over the female, like the womb and the female body and vaginas and ovaries, like, and the way that that's been controlled and suppressed and made to be insane, you know, there, I have a huge part of me that loves woman and loves everything that is woman, feminine, female, all the associations that have been demonized and controlled and weaponized, emotionality, sensitivity, nurturing, caring, collectivism, communal orientation, right? All of these things that have been so oriented towards the quote unquote woman and then demonized. And I'm like, first of all of those things are, again, they're not fucking woman, they're human. That's how you exist as a fucking, like, so there's this part of reclaiming that and lifting it up and having it be linked to a physical womb, because that link was also how it was weaponized. So I have this part of me that's like a little politicized in this way, that's like, I'm a woman and like I get to define what woman is, and woman is non-fucking binary. Like that's my, you know what I mean? It's like, that's what it is. And like, if we're going to talk about the role or the energy of a man in an archetype or energy as a protector, as a holder, as a filler, like I love doing that. I love providing service and care and protection and showing the fuck up and like getting big on the street and walking with my partner and watching someone look them up and down and having them feel dangerous and have me fucking like grow huge, right? Like I like my elbows go out and I stand really tall and I'm like, make long eye contact. That's like, you want to fuck with us? Fuck with me. You know, like I have that and I love that. And if that's what a man is, then call me a fucking man, because I'm a fucking man and I'm good at it. Like that's like, I want it, you know? And if I get acknowledged by you using he and him if that's how you're going to acknowledge and see that moment, and that's a celebration or respect, then I want that. Like, give me that fucking king mantle. I accept that. I want that. I want permission to be honored and to see and to hold that, you know, like if we're in that space. So that's like a piece. And then the other piece about it is like, as a spiritual being for my body, I also in my sex have this deep experience of my vagina and this energetic space and my womb and this receiving and this filling. But I also have like this energetic body experience that happens. That's like, I have a cock, like I have a light cock, and I also like wear cock sometimes, but I don't need one to have one. Like I have one, and that happens in my body. And I have filled my lovers with that energy, and it's real. It's really, really real. You know, it's really real. And so that, and I've experienced and pleasured myself with that energy, even without another lover. Like it's like, I've like felt that. And I have felt lovers who have penises open up and become these deep receptive spaces. That is this like, you know, I don't like vaginal divine feminine into this, you know, womb energy is also something, one of the things that I teach is like, like, cause of course my like menstrual, all this stuff, this womb energy and this root reclamation is that everyone has this energy of this like erectile. Well, first of all, literally everybody has all these tissues, like erectile tissue and these like soft, gushy, wet, seeping tissues, you know, like that we all can do that from these different places in our body. Our physical body does all of these things in a non-binary fucking way. Like that's the whole point. It's like humans do this. Like that's what we do. Like we do all of these things. Like that's, so I don't know, human, is that how I gender identify? Like a human? I don't, it's
good enough for me.
Right? Yeah, more and more. And again, it's like, if we're playing these language games as a way to celebrate and honor each other, I want in. You know, like don't leave me out, you know. I largely use she. When people ask me what pronouns I use, I often kind of, as you can hear, like I have all of these like thoughts and feelings that go through me around this. It's like, it feels really, it's like very real for me. My answer is either all pronouns welcome, or a lot of the time I just, you know, I often have this sense of like, as long as you use it with respect, it's good by me. And I often refer to myself, especially in my healing spaces, because I have been identified and did identify with like female and woman. So much of my healing is about like unshaming the associations that were put on me in that way. You know, like I was so socialized female, and then I received so much damage around my psyche, around what that meant, you know, about how I needed to, how one of my major powers is like, when I need things, I need to get more fragile. Right?
Yeah.
Like this manipulation tactic for survival is like so toxic for everyone, you know? And so there's this way in which, because I have these associations that are like, have been so deeply ingrained in me, going into those connections and then honoring and rewiring them, that I believe transcend past the gender identification, but those are the entry points that were socialized onto me. And so in that way, it's really important for me to hold it and let it be she, let it be like, I'm a girl, I'm a woman, I'm a, you know, because I had so many associations with that were subtle, and especially in my upbringing were in this kind of very spiritual and like progressive, like liberal parents' way. I was not like made a woman and then denied my kind of what I wanted and what I could be. Like they weren't contrary. Like I didn't have that experience of like, you're a girl, you can't do that. You know what I mean? So because I didn't have that much experience, I didn't have experience with that. There's plenty of associations where like my girl gendering wasn't actually gendering. It was really a reference to my genitals. Right. And then as I got older and the more and more socialization went along with it in the outside world, like the the decomposing, the like deconstruction or the recognition of that, like the waking up, the going to my like liberal arts college and being like, holy shit, classism, racism, sexism, like intersectionism, like it's just, we're so enculturated into this. There's a specific way to succeed in, right, this colonized white supremacist fucking culture. Like that's how you do that. And if you're not doing that, you're a fucking problem. And for me being like, I'm a gender transcendent energetic being who came here to like lick my own menstrual blood and make offerings to the ancestors and like, help people heal by respecting their body and the earth. I'm not following I'm not the checklist of playing by the rules. I'm like weeping on the street. I'm standing up for people and, giving voice. And I remember in 4th grade, I slapped someone across the face because they used a derogatory term for a gay person. And I palmed them, I just slapped them and said like, we do not use that kind of language in 4th grade, like fierce motherfucker, like that's, I was not playing by the, this was and it was a kid, like a guy kid. Right. And I just slapped him across the face and was like, nope, like, no, so it's like, I have that part of me that's just like, I'm not here to play by your, like, this is how people are right or wrong. And this is who deserves like space or permission or whatever. And I've felt like such a fucking freak my whole life in my spiritual understanding of reality, of just being like, literally it's all a game. We know that, right? And people around me are like, this is real. And I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's like not. A vibrational construction matrix field that we're like expanding our consciousness in, right? Like, no.
Wow. Yeah. And actually what you're saying is, it's really interesting because, I mean, you've just answered a load of the questions I had anyway. And you sound like a very aware child. So I was going to say, have you always been not aware of gender in this way, but just always, I guess, had this feeling of like, what is this? This doesn't work, or this isn't right. Or...
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. I came in, and I think a lot of kids do this. And one of the differences is that I had a family that really listened to children, which is like, I know.
Awesome. Yeah.
Exactly. It's awesome. And to me, that's like a standard. Like, of course you listen to children. They carry a wisdom and an access point to knowledge that children have. Teens have an access point that teens have. Elders have an access point that elders have. Like everybody inherently has an access point to a kind of wisdom in this experience, right? So I came in as soon as I could talk. I was telling stories about before I was born. So sometimes I refer to myself as like a little baby mystic, like I came in and being like, well, like when I was with God before I came down here, like I would tell those stories. Awesome. Yeah. I lived in a house where not only would they would listen to me, but those stories were told back to me. Oh yeah, Sophia said this, like Sophia told us this. And then my mom was an actress. She got chronically ill. She was a yoga teacher. And through her, like, and just a seeker, a spiritual, like a mystic, brilliant, intellectual artist. She's a brilliant actress and director and creative, so she's in this place. And I remember my mom went and saw the Dalai Lama speak when I was, I don't know, a kid some point. And she came back and we sat down and we were talking. I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something. And we're talking and she's like, and then the Dalai Lama said this, and then the Dalai Lama said that. And I was just sitting there, I was like nodding my head. Like she's just talking about all of these things. And I'm like, yeah. She just stopped and looked at me and was like, right, exactly. She was like, this all makes sense to you? And I was so confused. I was like, what could possibly not make sense about this fact that like, we are both the infinite creative universe and like, we're nothing. Like, how is that?
Doesn't everyone know that? Yeah.
Isn't that so obvious? So in that way, like, yes, I did really come in this way. And one of the most painful parts of my existence was how much, I think this is true for a lot of people, how much when we inherently know something to be true in our, like, in this deep, innocent, wholehearted, like love way. And then we like get bombarded either in a moment or sequentially by these things that are like, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. No, that's not true. And this chipping away at like this deep knowing, this deep heart, joyful, loving knowing, of me being like, no, but everybody deserves a place to live, and being told like, no, you see, it's complicated. And just like having this notion of being like, how
it
is
really
that
isn't
complicated?
It's not though.
Like,
yeah.
And then feeling like a crazy, and then for me, feeling like a crazy person, being told like, no, like this basic understanding to me, and they're all the same to me. It's like, they're all the same thing. It's like, yeah, I have a light cock, and like, yeah, my lovers, no matter what genitals they have wombs. Like, none of that's confusing to me. That's just what's always been true, And so to then be told that like, this is how things are, and to just be like, okay, one of us is like, I'm okay with you having a different experience, but you're telling me I'm wrong. So either I'm wrong, right? Or I'm wrong about whether it's okay to have different experiences. Like, it's so undermining of my sanity. And I did. I mean, I fucking went crazy when I was 19. Like, I did. All my trauma like exploded, and I dropped out of college, and I wept for like 6 years, and learned a lot of skills. Learned a lot of skills and repaired, and went back to this, like I had enough of a foundation that when I kind of stepped into this adult world and was like, yo, this is a shit show. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you're like looking at everything and just being like, your gender landscape is insane. It's so wrong. You're telling women they can and can't do all of these things. That of course I had this liberal hippie upbringing that was like, women can do everything. And like, men, it's good when men cry. And then I like walk out into this world and they're like,
nope.
I mean, I was in the world. I was in Philadelphia public school, but it's like, as I walked more and more out into the world, and people are like, oh, these are the rules. And I was like, yo, we're not fitting. Like, this is not meshing. You know what I mean? My inherent understanding of what is real and what's reality and what's being told is allowed and not allowed literally like made me insane. And I had to go through the process of recognizing and reclaiming myself as my own authority, and being like, oh, I don't have to fight with you as the authority. I don't have to convince the authority that I'm right. The first step I need to do is become my own authority, and then stand in that. And that's been my healing journey.
That is incredible. I mean, it's an incredible story, and it's like a lot to process. So I'm just trying to think of what to ask you next. Oh my God.
We can just take a minute and breathe.
Yeah. Wow. Do you think you're at a place now where you're, well, not happy with your gender necessarily, but do you see it as, I mean, has much evolved in that way, or have you always kind of had your own ideas? Obviously you've always had your own ideas about gender and what it is, what it's not, and what's wrong with it all. Do you see that evolving or changing for you? But also, what about the sort of world at large? Do you have any predictions, as it were?
Predictions.
I don't know if predictions is the right word, but let's go with it.
Sure. What I can say is, I have a lot of language to talk about it now. I remember when I did not think about gender for a huge chunk of my life. I mean, I realize now I was thinking about gender, but I wasn't thinking about it in a personal landscape. I wasn't in conflict with being kind of genderized as female or woman. I didn't have like a conflict with that necessarily. I was just like, okay, if I'm a woman, then a woman means they can have a light cock and they understand and enjoy. Like, I never experienced being misgendered, and I've multiple times in my life like had a shaved head, and different times, and people, call me sir and him and all that stuff. And I've always just been like, that's nice. Like, it didn't feel, but it wasn't until I started interacting with gender politics and I started hearing stories from people that were transgender, non-binary, agender, hearing their experiences, that I was like, oh, you're describing something in secular terms that I always understood in a spiritual understanding way. Like, I had a spiritual light being understanding of what they were talking about as like a cultural space. And so I really was able to kind of listen in on that conversation and join that conversation from a very different place and learn a lot more language to be able to talk about it. So I don't know. I just want to say that. So to say that, like, it's not like I was not a person at 14 necessarily, not with language dismantling gender norms. Like, that's not what was happening, you know? And I believe for myself, I was thinking about this when I was coming on to do this, because I had this moment of just being like, oh, like, I mean, I think about this with my own podcasts too, but it's just like, it's such a time capsule. Like, of course, I'm going to have a totally different experience of all of this in whatever, you know, if you were to ask me 5 years ago, I probably only would have been able to talk about, I don't know what I would have been able to talk about, but I feel like it would be different, right? Like, I imagine I will talk very differently about my understanding of gender and my, like, the other thing that I can hear while I'm talking about it with you is, like, I have a lot of anger around it, you know? And so I know that that means that there's a fire for transformation inside me and outside me, right? That anger is a sign that something is needing transmutation. So whether that's just that fire in me that's like, burn the fucking binary, controlling people, telling people what they are, like, what insanity. Why are we so obsessed with, like, it's just the thing of, like, when identities are used as a tool for collaboration, connection, and liberation, great, you know? And if they are used to control and repress and suppress and strip people away from their humanity or what they need, period at the end, then they are just weapons. They're not useful. That's destructive, you know? And so I have one colleague, Amy Jo Goddard, she's a sexual empowerment coach and thought leader and educator and artist, just really amazing human. And her prophecy that really resonates with me is that we're moving into a time of more and more identity, right? It's like, this is my name, this is my pronoun, this is where I'm from, this is my race, this is my like class upbringing, right? Like, identity, identification, or exposure, right? Acceptance, context, right? And so there's this process of creating context that exposes, I think the benefit of that is exposes the humanity, right? The wholeness of, like, I understand I'm coming from a particular biased viewpoint. Here, I'm going to share with you what has informed that so far. Boom, right? Like, I'm a white urban hippie, like, you know, who, like, largely has identified as female, but really experiences myself as a gender-transcendent spiritual being inhabiting the vehicular, like, body space cultural experience, you know. Okay, so when I talk, you're going to have an understanding about my viewpoint, right? And when we step out of that being a right viewpoint or a wrong viewpoint and step into a place of, these are the contexts that our viewpoints come from, I think that the identities are, and Amy Jo says this, that we're stepping into a time of really claiming our identities and claiming the power and the belonging and the connection that comes through identity. And then when that comes through and everybody becomes an individual in their wholeness, right? Because we're this combination of all these different identities. I do believe that there will be an aspect where the identities themselves are not identities. It's not, I am this or I am that. It's I've come from this, so this is the things that have influenced me. I am me. Like, I'm here. Like, this is what I am. It's like, I'm not even human. I'm humanist luminous. Right. I'm the experience. Like, and maybe this is, I mean, obviously, right? Like, I come from a very, I'm really on a spiritual evolutionary journey. Like, that's where I'm coming from. And so, you know, I connect to what Amy Jo says about that, of just like, we're stepping into a time of claiming those identities, you know, as long as, you know, same thing. It's like we need to claim them because whether they were put on us or not, we live in a land where they now have meaning and power, which means if they either have power over us or we claim those identities and claim the power that go along with those identities, right? I'm a queer, white, gender transcendent, like, medicine caller. Like I claim all these identities. I claim the power of that. And then I live my life free. That's the victory step, right? And to me, that's the goal. That's the prayer in everyone's heart, is like, how about our needs are met and we get to be our creative selves and we get to live like, and it's not separate for me. I also think like to think about, you know, humanity is to think about the earth, right? And to be in right relationship. Like none of these things are separate to me. They're just they're so there. And so, you know, when I claim the power of that and and then I claim my power and I look at someone else who claims all of that and I see someone who's in their wholeness or growing their wholeness, right? Like not needing to make it stationary or stagnant or like an arrival, like now you're here, right? But it's like in that place, in that evolving place. And then together we can have a sense of belonging and togetherness in our presence and in our existence, as opposed to the links of our identities, which I think the link of identity is, again, it can be so useful and it's important. Like, you know, affinity circles, like I've done so much work in women's spaces. I've done a lot of women's work, and it's powerful. It's powerful to have people who have that experience. It's also really powerful to do quote unquote women's healing work with other people in the space who either don't identify as female and to have other people who don't identify as female for a number of reasons, right? That doesn't have to undermine the reclamation or the healing or the energy that's taking place. Like it can still be collaborative. So I've experienced all of those things. So I don't know if that's that's kind of my, when I think about that, I think that's where we're going. I think when we claim these things as tools for ourselves, and we claim the power for ourselves, like going back to that place of like, oh, apparently I'm white because that's what so let me take that. You're not going to tell me that and then tell me how to do that condition me how to do. Well, I sure was conditioned how to navigate that in an unconscious way. Right. And now I'm going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to claim that. And now I'm going to consciously decide how that identity moves through the world, because that identity was moving through the world with impact previous to my consciously claiming that impact. Right. So same thing as like, you know, when I gender express as female, like, and people often look at me and just assume like cis female. And I'm like, you know, and then there's a part of me that's like, well, you're not like wrong, but you're not right. Right. Like, it's like, all like, so it's like, I claim this part of being like, I'm cis female-ish. Okay. Yeah. I definitely present and navigate and impact the world largely and frequently, not always, but frequently through that cis female impact. So if I can take that and wear that mantle and then use that with responsibility to myself and my soul and what I'm here to create, you know, then perhaps from that conscious inhabitants of those identities, I can build a life where those identities are not tools or weapons, and the experience that we're having is one in which we get to be who we are. And this idea of like this gender binary that I think I've established my opinion on it being a fucking fallacy in the fucking first place, that it can like it will just literally lose its grip because it's not real, is how I feel about it. Like it's just, that's how I feel about it.
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking, it sounds like some of the things you said reminded me of, it's kind of paradoxical sounding, isn't it? Like there's more individuality, but also more connection and interconnection. Yeah. So it seems like, you know, you can't have one and the other all at the same time, but it does, in my head, it does go together. Right. But it could be tricky to get your head around, I think.
Totally. Yeah. I have a personal growth invitation that I make for myself, which is that when things appear contrary, I know that's a place for healing, because inherently everything is unified. So if I'm perceiving something as contrary to one another, it means I'm having a gap in my perception to see how in which they are. Yeah, there is like continuity. And I will say this, when I say like the gender is a fallacy, like gender binary is a fallacy, like I will say this part, which is like, we create our realities, and like, it's not a fallacy, like it's not fucking fake right now. Like it has real world impacts, you know what I mean? Like, and so I just want to be clear about that. I'm not just saying like, it's not real. It's like, no, it's real as long as we continue to make it real. It's super fucking real. Like it's very, very, it's like very, very real. And there's a part of me that's like, and I would like to I would like to cultivate. I think I hold in myself and aim to cultivate experiences where that's honored. And there's this, you know, this deeper, for me, that deeper river that's been there all along, where I was like, oh, these are words you're putting on a thing, an experience that I've had all along, to let that like kind of lead me forward in my experience, and to make space for other people who have that experience with me that are saying, oh yeah, like I feel understood when you say that, and to recognize that like some people will hear this and be like, oh my God, she's totally describing something I felt my whole life. And other people will be like, what? Nope. Like, all right, right. Okay. Gender trans. Okay. Whatever. But like, this is the thing, you know? And I'm like, you're right. Like, that's the whole thing. Is like, that's the whole point. I don't need to be, you know, that's like, that's not contrary to me. You saying like anyone saying like, but this is what it needs to be, is like, okay, then like, that's what it needs to be. Like, if that's how you see it and that's your solution, then I hope you get your solution. That doesn't need to be contrary to my understanding. And I know that feels risky. That feels risky to say. That feels like almost the most risky thing I've said this whole time, is like,
well, it is a thing though, like holding, I don't know who said it, but holding two opposing views at the same time. I think, as you said, there is space there for healing, but I think that is also the place of incredible compassion, you know, and like anger and everything like that. And all that destructive stuff can't live in that space, because it's everything all at once. Oh, this is getting deep now, isn't it?
Well, and that's what I think, that's the part that really gets me excited, is like when you ask, here's my prophecy, here's my fucking prophecy. You said prediction. Here's my fucking prophecy.
Go for it.
Through this process, we will come into another layer of understanding that we have only felt in our bodies, but not cognited previously. And so our ability to create language and communicate and have identity understandings will fundamentally shift. Like, that's where we're going. That this idea of the gender binary or non-binary, how we're having that conversation that we're having right now is a healing conversation. And that through that process, we will arrive in somewhere inherently new, the creative, evolved landscape, a place that maybe some people have dreamed or felt, but that many people right now today cannot fathom. And that our reality will be that unfathomed landscape.
Yeah. I love that. That's incredible. Wow. I think this has been an amazing conversation. I could talk to you for hours, but I was thinking this would be a really good place probably to wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I love you.
Oh, I love you too.
Yeah. I just like connecting to that place of just like, what is it? I just had this moment today in my practice of just like having this deep wave. I had this grief come up and this sadness. And I just had this moment where I just kind of wrapped myself and was just like, you can be as sad as you are. And like, I love you and I'm with you, you know? And so I think the thing that I want to leave in that is like, as we're really decomposing, it's a corpse image that's coming to mind for me as we're having this conversation. For me, you know, as we're composting these weaponized, right? We're like these weaponized concepts, like there's pain to be felt as as we step out of numbness. So often we experience pain. Yeah. And so as like, may each of us, as we have the courage to step out of our numbness into our consciousness, into our awareness, may we hold ourselves so affectionately, and may we have the courage to hold each other without needing anyone else's pain or grief or understanding to move at a different speed. Like, can we just be where we are and trust that that will take us where we need to go, like when we're in that loving space? So that's my...
I would say amen to that. Yeah. Not that I'm religious, really, but still.
Amen.
That's another conversation, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, that's all. Yeah. So you can, some other time, me or
Yeah,
someone else.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for talking to me. This has been such an inspiring conversation, and I could feel your passion in it. And wow, wow. I'm sort of, my brain is in processing mode now, so I'm going to take this away, and the cogs will be turning. Yeah. So one last thing, I was thinking, if you'd like to share more about your work and how people can get in touch with you if they want to work with you, please feel free.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that opportunity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I took my body of work of healing, that like really claiming myself as my authority and doing all of that, and I turned it into a card game and an online academy. And I love to share that with people. It's called I Love My Life, and card game and academy. And that's one of the things that I love to share. It's literally like a group game as well as like a personal self-guided spiritual development thing.
Ooh, lovely.
And I have a Patreon. I'm a soul song sharer. I'm a poet. I have a bunch of podcasts, and I have a community in which we do the collective healing and storytelling together. So
Beautiful.
I'll send you those links, and
Sophia
Wise One.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
SophiaWiseOne.com and all those things. You can find me in those places, and I would be thrilled to connect with any of you. And if you have anything, if you loved anything or have any questions about it, if you want to like take a screenshot as you're listening to this podcast and tag me on Instagram with a question or a comment, I love to be connected with people that way too. So at Sophia Wise One is like where I am. So
brilliant. I'll make sure to share all that as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really, I told you I was nervous. Yeah. I've been wanting to have this conversation. I'm really grateful to have had it with you. And this is exciting. And yeah, may it serve. May it serve.
That's a great motto. May it serve. Yeah.
May it serve.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Sophia, where you can also read the transcript. And you can find out more about Sophia on her website, sophiawiseone.com, or on Instagram at Sophia Wise One. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.